So the topic of my thing is effective paths to alleviating food insecurity among older Americans, and as much as possible, I'm going to concentrate on Arkansas. So, the only reason I have any success at all is I work with just amazing people, and one of the amazing people I co-author with is Jim Ziliak. Jim Ziliak's at University of Kentucky, and he and I co-authored this annual report on senior hunger. So a large proportion of what I'm going to be presenting today comes out of the work that's done jointly with Jim. So I'm going to structure the presentation, first of all, talking about first how we measure food insecurity. Secondly, what is the extent of food insecurity both amongst seniors? I was asked to speak specifically about seniors. Then talking a bit about the consequences of hunger for seniors, and then finally what we can do. And when we talk about what we can do, the Alliance does all sorts of amazing stuff. I'm going to talk about one thing is I believe you talked about the importance of SNAP outreach in all your work. I'm going to be talking about SNAP. And here's, I'm a researcher, and I try to be as objective as possible. And I guess I am objective. But one thing I'll say without a doubt is SNAP is an amazing program. I'll never make the argument all government programs are great, but SNAP is amazing. And I want to be sure to have some time to talk about that. Okay, so the first thing is talking about how we measure food insecurity, because there's lots of different measures that are used and things, but I want to talk about precisely what we are talking about in this thing, is that there's 18 questions that are used in the so-called core food security module. So when you hear the annual report that's put out by USDA about the extent of food insecurity across the country, which just came out, two or 3 weeks ago, this is the measure that they use for this. And these are some of the examples of questions, from the least severe, as I worried whether our food would run out before we got money to buy more, all the way up to the most severe, for households with only adults, is in the last 12 months did you or the other adults in your house ever not eat for a whole day because there wasn't enough money for food. So this gives you a range of some of the questions that are posed out of these 18 items. For households with children, the full set of 18 questions are posed. For households without children is just the 10 questions that are adult-specific are posed. In terms of how we define food insecurity, here's where it gets a little bit complicated. When back in 2008, what was then the Meals on Wheels Association of America Foundation approached Jim and I about writing a report on senior hunger, and so they asked us to use these categories, and they're facing the threat of hunger, at risk of hunger, and hunger. So the problem is that these don't exactly correlate with what's used by the USDA. So when I say facing the threat of hunger, what this means is marginally food insecure, i.e. one or more affirmative responses to the core food security module. So whenever you talk, the second measure is food insecure, which is called at risk of hunger. One thing to note about when we talk about marginal food insecurity, these are individuals who are responding affirmatively to 3 or more questions on this. Suppose that a household responds affirmatively to only 1 or 2. By the official USDA definition, they're counted as food secure. So when we say that, 12.3% of Americans are in food insecure households, if we were instead to use that lower measure of marginal food insecurity, we have about 20% of Americans who are in food insecure households. So really it's lower than we might anticipate. And the third category is very low food secure, which is often called hunger, and that is 8 or more affirmative responses to the core food security module for households without children, 6 or more for households without children. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about food insecurity throughout this presentation. So any questions about how we define this? Okay. I will come to that momentarily. Okay. So now I want to turn to the extent of senior hunger. Okay. So what we see there is trends in the threat of hunger amongst senior Americans. And what this shows is the information from 2001 through 2015. Actually, this measure goes all the way back to 1996, but it's only on a consistent basis since 2001, so that's why we only present there. So a few things to talk about with respect to this that is always worth emphasizing. First is that you look at the number of seniors who are under threat of being food insecure. Looking at that is that back in 2001, there was about 4 million seniors who fell into that category. Okay, by 2015, this had increased up to 10 million. Okay, so there's many, many more seniors today that are food insecure than there were in the past. Even just a short 15 years ago, the number has risen dramatically. Now, this is in part because there's more seniors, right? One thing that we know about our population is that there's more and more seniors than there have been in the past. But also, as you'll see on this chart, is if you look at you have it in color, right? Yeah. Okay. So the red thing, so I don't have to say the diamond or something, so is on the red is that you see is that the rate of food insecure, of the threat of hunger has been increasing over this time. So it's risen in 2001 from about 10% and then up to about, 14% in 2015. Now, it's great. There was a drop in food insecurity in 2015, right? Okay, so there's a drop in the proportion of seniors who are food insecure. Fantastic. Yes?
What is the age range for a senior?
Okay, so yes, so a senior in this context, that is somebody defined as 60 or above. Okay, so part of the reason, the main reason we do this is that USDA, when people are 59 and a half and older, they have different eligibility criteria. I have no idea why they said 59 and a half. Does anybody know why it's 59 and a half? Because nobody ever says, how old are you? 58 and a half. I mean, for little kids, you always say that. So I have no reason why 50, but that's why we use that. For some of the other work that we've done with AARP Foundation, since they call seniors 50 and above, is that then for that work we'd use 50 and above. So I'll be an AARP member next year. So, all right, so this is, if I tell you something. So then is that this is the trends of threat of senior hunger in Americans. But the thing is that yes, it fell from 2014 to 2015, fantastic. But if you notice, is looking at that red line, it's still substantially higher than it was in 2001. So despite all the great work being done by the Alliance and by groups all across our country, we still are struggling with these high rates of food insecurity. So yes, let's be happy by that blip down, but let's be disappointed that it's not down farther to where at least it was in 2001, or at the very least, let's get it back to where it was in 2007. I mean, that's not good. Okay. So then turning to some of the other figures that we have here. These are, as you'll see here is that, interestingly among seniors, is that non-metro areas recently have higher rates of food insecurity than metro areas. And this wasn't always the case, okay, as you can see on that figure, but recently it's. Now this is of great concern because I'm sure that all of you have worked with cases of, there's this old notion about aging in place and some of the challenges that seniors face in rural areas about not having enough access to food and things like that as they get older. Okay. Figure 3 provides some information about the threat of food insecurity by race, and as you'll see, African Americans have substantially higher rates of food insecurity every year across this than either the category of whites or other in this case, which means non-white and non-black. But one good news again, in 2014 and 2015, there was a substantial fall in food insecurity amongst African American seniors. Turning to the next page to look at this by Hispanic ethnicity is that, again, Hispanics have higher rates for every year. There was a sharp fall in 2014 and 2015. One thing to note about Hispanics currently in the United States is the proportion of Hispanics is growing. If you look at the proportion of children who are Hispanic in the United States, I think it's like 25% roughly. It's 25%. Among seniors, it's much lower. I think it's 8 to 10%, quite a bit lower than the rest of this. However, this proportion of Latinos who are in the group of seniors is rising, and so it's something to look at in the future. Okay. I'll turn into figure 5, the trends and the threat of senior hunger by age. So usually whenever we do research is, I know the answer before I do the work most of the time. So it's about 90% of the time I can predict what the answer would be. However, with age, we were genuinely surprised, okay? What you see on this is usually the picture of senior hunger I've always thought about isn't, an old senior who's 80 years old, aging in place, in a particular house. That's the image that is oftentimes portrayed of senior hunger. However, as you can see on here, is that it's really older seniors who are less likely to be food insecure than younger seniors, okay? So in terms of thinking about who is most likely to be food insecure amongst seniors, is the face of senior hunger is actually maybe a 62-year-old rather than a 78-year-old. And I think that has implications for how we do work addressing senior hunger in our country.
Why is that?
Yeah. So this really is, to some extent, a mystery to us. We really don't know. And even after controlling for other relevant factors, it still holds. But let me point out a few reasons why this might be holding. The first possible reason is differential mortality. We've done some work, actually with some other great colleagues at University of Toronto, looking at the connection between food insecurity and mortality. And those who are food insecure are substantially more likely to die young than those who are food secure, okay? And so it's not that people are dying specifically of malnutrition, but being food insecure is hard. I mean, that's a hard thing to do, to deal with year after year after year, month after month after month, all these challenges, and we find that those who are so it could be is that amongst the 80-year-olds is that we're measuring those who did not die earlier and they're just better off, okay? That's one thing that's been put forward. Another possibility is that older seniors oftentimes get satiated more quickly when they eat. So if you objectively look at how much an 80-year-old senior is eating, you might be like, boy, that's by definition food insecure. You're just not getting enough nutrients and everything. However, if they get satiated more quickly in response to the questions, they're like, I'm getting enough food even though they're not in any objective sense. So those are two of the reasons that have been thrown out. But it's still we really don't understand why it is. The same question. Okay, that was good. Okay. Now, the previous slides have shown how certain categories within the population are more or less likely to be food insecure. And one thing I didn't put up there was by income, okay? If somebody has lower incomes, the probability of being food insecure is substantially higher, as you might imagine, okay? However, it doesn't mean that all poor people in the United States are food insecure, nor does it mean that all non-poor people are food secure. In fact, for the population as a whole, 60% of poor households are food secure. Despite all the challenges to maintain food security, 60% of our poor households are resourceful and all these other things. The Cooking Matters courses helped out a lot in terms of all this. Also, of course, SNAP. We can't forget about SNAP. Yes?
On this, in the age groups, does it also include like the ones that are in nursing homes, or is it just ones that are independently like living by themselves or with assisted living, or does that include the ones in nursing homes also?
So it would depend upon the structure of the nursing home, whether it's considered like a separate residence or whether it's part of a nursing home. Some would be included in that, others would not, depending upon how the nursing home is structured. So yeah, so you're definitely amongst that 80 and over group, you're definitely getting a group there that's probably may not be included in this because they're in nursing homes. One thing I should say about those that a lot of the people in nursing homes probably are getting 3 square meals a day. So they probably would be considered to be food secure. But whether or not they're in this sample is a good point, so it might be understated. Yeah. So this idea that poverty equals food insecurity is not true. And we can see this in these distribution of income groups, is looking at those with incomes. You see the black line there, the black bar graph where it says those above 200% of the federal poverty line. In other words, a high proportion of seniors over 20% are facing hunger, okay? Almost 30% are at risk of hunger, and almost 30% are marginally food insecure. So what you see is that the point where I'm making here is that there's a lot of people who are food insecure among seniors who are not what we think of as being poor. A lot of them are not poor, which presents a challenge. It's especially a challenge for those who, because they have enough income, that they're not eligible for SNAP, okay? So they have people who are struggling with hunger, but they're not eligible for SNAP. So this is something I don't want to forget. And a similar story in terms of the distribution by race categories, if we think of African Americans and whites, is that while African Americans have all else equal, actually not all else equal, but African Americans have higher rates of food insecurity, as I pointed out earlier, is that a much higher proportion of whites are food insecure, of the total food insecure population. Okay. Now, on the next slide is, some of you might be familiar, Feeding America has something called Map the Meal Gap, where you can look at county-level estimates of food insecurity for all counties in the United States, okay? So for those of you who, well, you can look at any county you want. Anybody here not from Arkansas besides Duke? Okay, everybody else is from Arkansas. Okay. So anyway, this gives you a picture of what food insecurity looks like in Arkansas. This is not specific to seniors, rather it's for all persons, okay? So, but of course seniors are included in that group, so it gives you a picture of what food insecurity looks like in Arkansas. Probably well, I don't know if there's surprises here. Along the Mississippi Delta, you have really high rates of food insecurity, as you'll see there, food insecurity rates above 30%. In a lot of these areas, and between 25 and 30% in others. Other parts of the state are doing better, like northwest Arkansas. Is that where, where's that dot in the upper corner? Is that Bentonville or Fayetteville? Where is that? That's Fayetteville. Okay, so they're up, they're doing a bit better, but over, you'll see it gives you a distribution of what's happening in the thing. So when talking about any state, whether it be Arkansas or any state, what you have to remember is that food insecurity rates are not evenly distributed throughout the state, and it produces certain challenges. Now, for Arkansas, Arkansas is a great state, but oftentimes you guys are high up in the rankings for the lowest, highest rates of food insecurity, okay? But the good news is you guys are falling out of those lists. Is that in the most recent one is that the rates of marginal food insecurity is 19.6%, but you're fifth now in the country. Looking at food insecurity is the rate amongst seniors in Arkansas is 10.6%, and you're eighth. And you've dropped out of the top 10 for very low food security. You have a 3.4% rate, and so it's really good that Arkansas is. Well, that means other states are doing worse. But anyway, nevertheless, Arkansas is doing better, which is great news and a tribute to all the really great work that all of you do to make sure that people across the age range is food secure. Okay. I'm going to skip over, because I want to talk about SNAP. I'm going to skip over the next things, but the thing is that I wanted to briefly say, for seniors we did a lot of work about, what determines food insecurity among seniors, and you'll see these, in other words, controlling for other factors. Does something matter? Does something not matter? One thing I want to emphasize about this, though, is the issue of grandchildren in the household. One thing that we've seen over the past 10 years, really, is that there's been a dramatic increase in the number of multi-generational families. Okay? Grandparents raising grandchildren, sometime with the parent in the house, sometimes not with the parent in the household. What we see in this work is actually, all else equal, the children are better off when a grandparent is in the household, controlling for all the other factors. One more person to help, one more person to bring in some income, all these reasons is they're better off. However, for seniors, it's the exact opposite, okay? A lot of seniors are now put in the position of having to raise grandchildren that they may not have anticipated doing. They may not have anticipated doing this. They may not have the money to do this. They may not have the money saved up to do this. It presents a really big challenge. And as the number of multi-generational households in our society increases, I think we're going to face more and more challenges with respect to this. It's something we need to be talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later when I talk about SNAP. Okay. Now, the next slides are about the effect of food insecurity on nutritional intake. We talk a lot about how seniors, it's a tragedy that seniors don't know where their next meal is coming from, okay? In and of itself, that's a problem, okay? But what we also see is that seniors who are food insecure, even after controlling for other factors, controlling for income, controlling for age, controlling for all these other things, have substantially lower nutrient intakes across the board. And so what this shows here is that, up to like vitamin A, it's like 12% lower nutrient intakes of vitamin A. Or calcium, we're oftentimes concerned about calcium intake amongst seniors, as that's lower. All these things are lower, okay? So I want to emphasize is that the effects, so if somebody says to you, I don't care about seniors going hungry, say, well, fine. But you may care about, though, the fact that the nutrient intakes are lower amongst those, okay? Amongst those seniors. So in other words, this is a healthcare crisis, as you can see on the next slide here, where we talk about all the other serious negative health consequences associated with food insecurity. I think we need to be talking about this a lot more. In the context of seniors, yes, but I'm not supposed to talk about other groups, but across the age range, okay? This is a public health crisis in our society that we have so many people that are food insecure. And this has manifested itself in all these worse outcomes that we see amongst food insecure households. One other thing about this is that it also raises healthcare costs, as you might imagine. Somebody's food insecure, raises Medicare costs and everything else. Okay. So always keep that in mind. Okay. So any questions about that? Okay. Let me talk a little bit then about what we can do to alleviate food insecurity. And today, I really want to concentrate on SNAP, okay? SNAP's been a program for, I guess, over 50 years now. I'm going to come back to this again and again. The primary goal of SNAP is to alleviate hunger, okay? Over time, it's been talked about, should we do X, Y, or Z? No, the most important thing about SNAP is alleviating hunger, okay? We can never forget this because oftentimes people criticize SNAP. You've all heard the reasons why people criticize SNAP. It's not designed for anything else except to alleviate hunger. If there's things that can make it do a better job at alleviating hunger, fantastic, let's pursue those. If there's any proposals out there that don't improve the ability of SNAP to alleviate hunger, we need to really speak out. Well, I can't speak out since I'm an academic. Well, I do anyway, but is that we really have to say that, look, this is not a good idea. Okay, so this gives you can read here about some of the issues pertaining to SNAP and the eligibility criteria. It's an enormously successful program, okay? Compared to eligible non-recipients, SNAP recipients are 20% less likely to be food insecure, okay? That is amazing. There's not many government programs, in fact, I can't think of one, that has such a profound positive benefit for people, okay? When people ask me, what's a successful government program? I say SNAP. SNAP really is. It's the quintessential successful program. It sets out to do something, alleviate hunger in our country, and it does an incredible job at that. If only all our government programs could be that great, okay? They should aspire to be like SNAP. That's why other people, when they talk about making SNAP like other programs should be like SNAP. Okay, now, I want to talk a little bit then about the importance of SNAP for seniors, okay? So really, SNAP is the only, there are some minor and very important, just because I say they're minor doesn't mean they're not important, programs that are for seniors. However, SNAP is the only large-scale nutrition program that's available for seniors, okay? At other ages, there's school lunch programs, things like that are available but for them. Okay? Again, as I noted, SNAP has a positive effect on nutrition and food security. So every senior we get onto SNAP, we know is going to alleviate their probability of hunger. We know it's going to improve their nutrition. So And there's an increased emphasis on SNAP. Okay. However, seniors have much lower rates of participation in SNAP for a number of reasons. It could be that for some seniors it's perceived as a diminished need for SNAP, stigma associated with transaction costs. And for a lot of seniors is they have low benefit levels. Now, that they have low benefit levels is to some extent a good thing, okay? It's a good thing because it means that they have enough other income that leads to, because the amount of SNAP benefits somebody gets is inversely related to income. But that's why a lot of seniors don't pursue. However, these differences are still unexplained, and Jim and I have some work on this. So one thing that we're hoping is that over time, one of the reasons why like 70-year-olds didn't participate in SNAP in, say, the 1980s is they didn't have experience with the program growing up, okay? However, 70-year-olds today, SNAP has been a program for 50 years. So we hope that greater familiarity of this program will mean in the future more and more seniors participate. So that's our hope. Okay. Okay, so how can we improve SNAP for seniors? Encouraging participation may require different strategies by age. It's actually, those over 60 have lower rates of participation. However, participation rates are surprisingly low amongst those 40 to 60 after their children leave the house, okay? And this is really a group that oftentimes is overlooked in discussions of food insecurity in our country, is that nobody talks about that 40 to 60-year-old. And I'm here to talk about seniors today, so I'm not going to talk about them, but I think we do need different strategies for that thing. And one thing is that we really need to address barriers for these grandparents raising grandchildren. For a lot of grandparents raising grandchildren, even if they're de facto raising grandchildren, is that de jure, oftentimes they're not, because they may not have parental rights that define for it, and therefore it's hard for them to get on SNAP. So ways to really to address this is the thing. Another thing that I would probably talk about would be to reevaluate the minimum benefit levels, okay? Is that let's raise this minimum benefit level. Let's make it more a better thing for seniors to get onto the program. I think that, again, the reason why seniors have low benefit levels is in part because they have higher income is inversely related to it. But if we set a lower benefit level, that would be a great way to do it. By the way, two of my other co-authors, Brent Kreider and John Peppers, we have a paper that's coming out, Russell Sage Foundation, which talks about ways to reconfigure SNAP to better alleviate food insecurity. And one of our proposals is to raise the minimum benefit level by this thing. And again, if the government wants to alleviate food insecurity, there's no more effective way to do so than giving more money to SNAP. And there really isn't. People talk about all these other things. No. Talk about SNAP. In fact, we should be spending a lot more money on that program. Okay. Now, unfortunately, there's some people who don't like SNAP. I mean, you've seen the different people criticize SNAP. God knows why. But anyway, okay, so the first problem with the threats to SNAP is that people want to block grant the program. Okay, that's really a bad idea. Okay, the beauty of SNAP is that it expands. Oh, I only have 3 more minutes. The beauty of SNAP is that it expands during bad economic times and contracts during good economic times. That's what makes it a successful program. Once you block grant a program, they forget about it, and they generally don't increase the benefit levels except during bets. So, fight against block grants. The other thing is restrictions on who participates. The first two, in terms of drug testing and work requirements, aren't as germane for seniors. But I do want to talk a little bit about these restrictions on purchases, and I want to conclude with this. There's been a lot of talk, hopefully not in Arkansas. Hopefully Arkansas, everybody is wise enough not to propose imposing restrictions on it, okay? You impose restrictions on SNAP, the main group that's going to be hurt are seniors, and here's why, is that there's direct consequences. Is if you start saying you can only purchase X, Y, and Z, and you can't purchase P, D, and Q when you go to a food store, okay? That's really stigmatizing. We already know that a lot of seniors don't participate in this program because it's stigmatizing. Do you want to further stigmatize it by being patronizing and condescending to people to say, you can purchase this, but you can't purchase that. Okay? Increased food prices, reductions in SNAP outlets. But there's these indirect consequences are that there'll be increased food insecurity and no change in obesity. We won't talk about that, but that doesn't matter. The reason why this is especially problematic for seniors is that for a lot of other households, if they're getting like $350 a month in benefits, they may be like, look, I don't want to be patronized by the government by them telling me what I can and can't eat, but I'm willing to accept that because my family needs $350 a month. There's a lot of seniors who are getting $30 a month. And do we really want to be telling the seniors in our society that they can't purchase Gatorade for their grandchildren when they come over for the weekend? Do we really want to be doing that as a society, being patronizing and condescending to our seniors? And seniors who are getting lower benefit levels are more likely to say, I'm not going to be on the program. So we have to be constantly talking about, by imposing restrictions, you're hurting all SNAP participants and all potential SNAP participants, but you're especially hurting, not you, because all of you are against restrictions. Those who are in favor of restrictions are especially hurting seniors in our society. And I conclude with that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.